Hi everybody, it's Andy, and welcome again to my office in Los Altos, California. I'm an attorney licensed to practice law in California as well as New York, and in this video I'm going to talk about attorney's fees. So what I'm going to describe is California specific. If you are not in California and, let's say you're a lawyer in another state in the US, or you're a lawyer in another country, for example, leave me the answer down below in the comments about how attorney's fees are treated in your state or jurisdiction. This video is going to be California specific only. So all of that said, then the question that I guess probably a lot of you, if you're involved in a lawsuit, like you're unrepresented or something, the question basically is this: Andy, hey, I've been sued by this person. I know I've done nothing wrong. This person just wants to be a pain. This person is angry at me for whatever reason. They just want to, make my life miserable. I know I've done nothing wrong. If I win my lawsuit, if the plaintiff rather loses, like they've sued me, and if they lose, can I make them pay for my attorney's fees? Because hey, to be fair, I've done absolutely nothing wrong. They just want to be a pain. It doesn't seem fair that I should have to pay $50,000, $20,000, whatever it is. It doesn't seem fair for me to have to pay all this money to defend myself when I've done nothing wrong. Can't I make the plaintiff, the at-fault party here, can't I make them pay for the expense that I had to incur because of them? So in general, unfortunately, the answer, at least in California, is no. I've never surveyed it like across the globe and stuff, but I've been told like the American rule, contrasted with the European rule, for example, I've been told that the American rule basically is that everybody in a litigation has to bear their own attorney's fees and costs. I know that for a fact. I see it in court cases all the time. I don't know whether or not that's the same rule like in other parts of the world too. So anyway, but historically, the American rule has always been that if you're involved in a lawsuit, attorney's fees and costs, each party bears their own. So, and unfortunately, that means in a case where you have been sued in a frivolous lawsuit, let's say, even if you win, your attorney's fees and costs are going to be borne by you. So, in general, then, like there is no entitlement to have the winning party, I guess, in a lawsuit. The winning party in general has no entitlement to have the losing party pay their attorney's fees. So, there are two exceptions to this, basically, in California, and they are number one, if statute has says otherwise, or if contract says otherwise. So I'll explain what those mean. So in general, the rule in the U.S. is that if you're involved in litigation, each party bears the cost of their own attorney's fees. So the exception number one, is that if there is a statute of some kind that is being litigated over, if there's a statute of some kind, the statute itself might include an explicit provision that says, okay, the prevailing party gets attorney's fees from the losing party, let's say. So, so number one, I guess, is that if the statute or statutes in question, in your case, explicitly say that the winning party, the prevailing party, gets attorney's fees, that's one way to make the other guy, the losing party in your case, pay for your attorney's fees. Number two is if the contract that you guys are fighting over in your case contains an attorney's fees provision. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that it's a landlord-tenant situation, and a lot of leases, if you're a renter in California, if you've never noticed it, I guess, go ahead and read your lease. The vast majority of apartment leases, house leases, etc., way at the bottom, or I guess usually it's at the end of the contract. At the end of the lease, generally there will be a provision that says something like this: in the event litigation arises, the prevailing party shall have or shall be entitled to reasonable attorney's fees and costs, something like that. So it generally will say prevailing party is entitled to fees and costs of some kind. So if there is litigation that arises, let's say that the landlord has to evict the tenant or something, and let's say the landlord wins, because of that fee provision in the lease, when the landlord wins, he or she are going to get their attorney's fees paid also. So the tenant, if the tenant loses, the tenant not only has to move out, pay whatever back rent is ordered paid. On top of all that, they have to pay the landlord's attorney's fees also. So that's the second exception. Number one is if the statute or statutes in question explicitly say that the winning party is entitled to attorney's fees. That's exception number one. Exception number two is if the contract or the agreement or the lease or whatever is being sued over if that document contains a provision that says the winning party will get attorney's fees. In general, these are the two ways that you get attorney's fees in California if you're the winning party. Yeah. So I will say that also, it's really rare, but on some occasions, if the judge feels that your case is really lousy, let's say, the judge on occasion will have the ability to award fees and costs as well. So that's really rare. I mean, it's not something that I would count on by any means, but I'll give you an example. So let's say, for instance, that I'm involved in a case with another party, or I, as the lawyer, am representing a client, and we're involved in a case against somebody else. And let's say, for instance, that there's a court hearing, and the attorney on the other side, or the party on the other side, let's say that the other party is not prepared at all for this court hearing, and they're so grossly unprepared that the hearing is basically a waste of time, and the hearing has to be rescheduled. If you're the other party over there and you're unlucky, and the judge basically goes like, "Come on, guys, you're completely unprepared. You've wasted everybody's time today." On occasion, the judge will basically say, "Because you have wasted everybody's time, I'm going to make you pay for Mr. Chen's appearance fee for today. Because had you been prepared, Mr. Chen and his client would not have wasted their time. But because you were so grossly unprepared, Mr. Chen, his client has had to pay him for today. It's a waste of his money. That's not fair. You should bear the penalty for that." So I've seen that happen a couple times in court. Never had it happen to me personally yet. Like, I've never had the judge ordered that the other guy pay my attorney's fees for the day. But I have seen that happen before. Generally, you have to, I guess, for lack of a better word, you generally have to screw up pretty badly in court for a Superior Court judge in California to order that the other guy pay your fees for the day. It happens, but it's really rare. So what's more common is those two exceptions that I kind of went over. Number one, the statute authorizes attorney's fees. Number two, the contract, agreement, whatever, also authorizes attorney's fees. So hopefully all of that made sense. Kind of in general, in California at least, in the U.S., you generally, as the winning party, do not have an automatic entitlement to attorney's fees and costs. In California, at least, you generally have to qualify under one of these two exceptions. So if that kind of makes sense to you, I'll sort of explain what the rationale is for the American rule. That at least this is what I learned in law school. So I guess you can phrase this a couple different ways, but one of the things about the U.S. that I think makes the U.S. unique, hopefully, if you're not, in the United States, if you're in another country that, what I'm about to say applies to also, leave me a comment down below. I certainly have, don't proclaim to have expertise in how the legal system in other countries work. But in the U.S., at least, one of the things I think makes the U.S. sort of unique is that everybody has their day in court. So, like, no matter who you are, no matter how educated you are or are not, no matter how much money you have, you generally will have the same rights in court that anybody else will have. So if, for instance, let's say that the U.S. rule was that, okay, whoever loses a case in court, in general, has to pay the other guy's attorney's fees. So the losing party generally has to pay the winning party. Let's say that was the rule. If for example, like, you're sort of lower income, let's say that you don't have very much money, but you have a case where in your heart you believe that you're right, that you've been done a wrong. If the rule is that, if you lose, you have to pay the other guy's attorney's fees, that basically is a really, really, really big disincentive, I guess, to kind of sue, because if you're poor, if you're middle income, if you're barely scraping by, you go, well, I really want to sue, but hey, I can't guarantee that I'll win. My lawyer says that he can't guarantee that I'll win. If I lose, I might have to, I not only get, I not only don't get whatever money I was hoping to recover, but I've had to pay my lawyer a whole bunch of times. A whole bunch of money. If I also have to pay the other guy's lawyer, that could be several $1 million. Hey, I don't want to risk that. Hey, I'm not going to sue. It's fine. Like, I'll just live with it. It's no big deal. So that's the genesis, I guess, or the rationale behind the American rule. If the rule was that the losing party has to pay the winning party, that's basically going to dissuade a lot of people to not file lawsuits because they just don't want the possibility, or they're basically dissuaded by the possibility that they might have to pay the other guy's fees. Like, it's just not worth it. So the American rule, I think, does not, like, it does away with that. So the American rule does not dissuade people from filing lawsuits. Sounds a little weird to say it that way, but yeah, that's basically the rationale. If the losing party had to pay the winning party, that there's a possibility that that might discourage a lot of people who have legitimate lawsuits from filing them because they don't want the risk of having to pay the other guy's attorney's fees if they lose. So in law school, if you're an attorney, if you went to law school at all, oftentimes this is called the chilling effect. So basically like if the American rule were reversed, it would be a severe chilling effect on people who have legitimate claims, and they would just be dissuaded from filing them. So hopefully that made sense. That last bit about the chilling effect probably is a little bit beyond most people. Lawyers, hopefully you remember your constitutional law class well enough to understand what chilling effect means. So anyway, that's basically the idea. To summarize again, in general, in the U.S., the winning party generally does not have the automatic entitlement to attorney's fees. The reason is because if they did, then it would possibly dissuade a lot of people who have legitimate claims from filing lawsuits, because the risk of having to pay the other guy's attorney's fees would be a severe kind of it's just not a risk that they want to take. So yeah. In California, in general, in order to get attorney's fees as the prevailing party, you have to fall into one of two exceptions. Number one, the contract that was number two. So number one is the statute, rather. The statute that you're suing over contains a provision that the winning party gets fees and costs. Number two is that the contract or document that you're litigating over has a provision like that in it. So number three, to be complete, number three is that, if you have basically done something, if you've screwed up really badly, the judge in your case might order you to pay some sort of attorney's fees to the other guy, just for the day, let's say, if you're unprepared for a hearing. So, that's basically it. Go ahead and watch this video again if you want. Comment, share, like, subscribe. But this question about attorney's fees comes up a lot, and I figured, it's about time that it was addressed in a video of mine. So. Anyway, like I said, go ahead and comment, share, like, subscribe, etc. And I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks.